The House will come to order. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 2226. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2226, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to agriculture, the third engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Mauer, Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today we have the opportunity to hear about the committee work done on behalf of agriculture and our farmers and ranchers. The Omnibus Ag and Food Finance Bill appropriates funding to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the Board of Animal Health, and the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute. I was pleased to have the opportunity to chair this division and was proud of the engaged, thoughtful, courteous, respectful exchanges we had throughout our hearings. What has always been seen as one of, if not the least partisan committee, proved once again that discussion and dialogue among colleagues who may not always see eye to eye can lead to a good product, even when our perspectives differ. We can and did learn from each other. I like to believe we stretched our own thinking and broadened our own understanding. I know I did. We demonstrated that legislators can respectfully disagree, challenge each other to see a different viewpoint, and ultimately move forward toward agreement. The Republican lead for our committee, Representative Rod Hamilton, he and I have served together for 15 years as members of the mighty class of 2004. I have the utmost respect for Representative Hamilton and his knowledge of the ag industry. He is passionate and forthright and a great advocate for what he believes. All of our committee members were engaged and curious. We had many new members who brought fresh perspectives and insights, while our veteran members provided education and guidance. Altogether, it allowed for healthy discussion. There is no doubt we all are served immensely well by the nonpartisan and partisan staff who surround us and make us all look good. The Ag Food Division was very ably served by the nonpartisan staff, our fiscal analyst, Ken Savory, and House researcher, Colby Sullivan. They are tremendously skilled fellows. Our partisan researchers, Mark Nisley for the Republican caucus and Bennett Smith for the DFLers, gave us insightful information and supportive suggestions. The behind-the-scenes work of our pages, Benjamin and Seaver, was greatly appreciated. I have the two best assistants. Nancy Connolly is seasoned, smart, strategic, and keenly knowledgeable. Sincerely, I think the best committee administrator in the Minnesota House. And what a joy for us all to have our committee legislative assistant, Carl Kazi, who stepped into the job 1 week into session. Carl's easy, friendly style is surpassed only by his extraordinarily strong organizational skills. As we all know, agriculture has had a rough time over the last 5 years. Although we cannot change prices or stop tariffs, we can expand market opportunities. We can support those who are facing tough financial and emotional challenges, and we can advance research of new and growing ag products. We cannot stop diseases from coming to our state, but in this bill we provide funds to address potential ag emergencies, including extremely catastrophic diseases like African swine fever. We know the median age of farmers is around 57 years of age. In this bill, we promote efforts to support beginning farmers, even those not from your usual ag backgrounds. Representative Poston wanted us to understand the importance of the Ag Centers of Excellence in the Minnesota state system. This bill helps educate current farmers who are engaged in the Farm Business Management Program and helps educate and provide resources for FBM instructors to be even better at seeing when stress is becoming too overwhelming for their students. This idea came from testimony taken when Representative Poston's bill to increase funds for the Minnesota State Centers of Ag was heard. In this bill, we fund priorities that advance ag marketing and development opportunities, including farm to school, Minnesota grown, and domestic and international trade. We provide strong funding to combat noxious weeds, including the highly invasive Palmer amaranth. This bill funds the agreed research that Representative Hamilton fought so hard to get. In that section, we underscored the need to do more in the areas of African swine fever and chronic wasting disease. We also include emerald ash borer as a high priority plant pest within the rapid detection and management area of this bill. Pollinator protection is important to our members, and we have some provisions to address that. Ag Commissioner Peterson highlighted the need to provide ongoing support for the MDA laboratory and to increase the numbers of meat inspectors. We fund those requests in this bill. Representative Samantha Vang has become very knowledgeable on the possibilities for the industrial hemp industry. We include language both she and Representative Franzen have regarding Minnesota's responsibility to act to request Minnesota's responsibility to act to request primary authority. Another critically important piece of this bill is the funding to provide emotional and legal support for our farmers who are seeing stress that hasn't been seen since the mid-1980s. In this bill, we have money to fund additional farm advocates and one additional rural mental health provider who works with farmers all across the state. The Minnesota House has already been on record as strongly supporting this effort, and we hope to make sure our Senate colleagues know how truly necessary this funding is. Article 2 of this bill details changes to the farm cervidae industry due to chronic wasting disease. Using Representative Becker-Finn's and Representative Herr's bills as a base, the bill intends to manage the needs of a livestock farming industry with the rich hunting heritage we cherish in our state. Movement has been made from all stakeholders to get this portion of the bill into a solid position. Articles 3 and 4 includes Representative Anderson's language derived from the Grain Advisory Group. I am proud of the work of our division and proud to present this bill to the body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poppe moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded DEA 2200.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my amendment. Again, we did receive the Senate version of the bill. We want to make sure that they understand the importance of all of these things, so we are putting in the House language. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poppe moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A35.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the author's amendment, and it does a couple of things. When we rolled out this bill in committee, we knew that we had a few things that were still hanging out there that we needed to address. One of those was the Turf Seed Council. We wanted to be able to provide some language in here to make sure that we're going into conference. The Senate has language and has money on their side. We want to make sure that we are also matching up with that because we think that's important. So we include language to include basic and applied turf seed research. We also changed the funding. We were looking at trying to do something for the Center for Rural Policy and Development that would increase some funding in the first year, but ask them to do a study, a solar study for us and the impact on farmers. I know Representative Hamilton has had a number of conversations with me about the importance of perhaps not detailing for the center the kinds of things that we would might want them to do. So we are actually reducing the amount of what they're getting. So $175,000 the first year. We're taking $25,000 that was the extra money and putting that into the MDA so that they can do the study. And then we also obviously had some discussion about chronic wasting disease. Again, that's in the second article. And a couple of things that we did. One was regarding the tagging when the newborn fawns are born. We wanted to kind of address that. And there was a lot of discussion about that. But in this amendment, we're taking some language that Representative Lueck had brought forward in committee as an amendment. And I think that this is a better approach to what we're trying to do, and so hopefully that's something that people can agree with. And then the other thing that happened is, one of the issues in the chronic wasting disease is how we're impacting livestock farmers who are in the cervidae farming industry. And if they have chronic wasting disease, and if it's found, they automatically are being asked or would be asked under this bill to depopulate. And it's not clear if all of the animals are going to be impacted from this disease, but all of them would be killed as a result of it. And so, not knowing yet what all of the future might hold with scientific research, and I know some states are already looking at having a live test, so this is an attempt to accommodate that possibility, that in the future we may have a live test for chronic wasting disease, and because of that we wanted to have some language that said if a live test is available and the Board of Animal Health, in accordance with the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Ag, agrees that they can use that and they have protocols in place on how they're going to deal with it, then we'd be able to have a live test. So that's what the amendment is, Madam Speaker, and I believe that's all of the amendment, and I would appreciate your support.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson P. moves to amend the Poppe amendment to Senate File 2226, the third engrossment, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A40.
Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker, thank you. In my packet, I've searched dither and yon, and I can't find an A40 amendment. So could somebody help me out here?
It's the pink.
Representative Anderson, be in the pink packet.
Would it help to say I'm colorblind?
Oh, Representative Anderson, did you locate the A40?
Yes.
There we go. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I'd like to thank Chair Poppe for the work she did. Very, very tough subject to talk about the CWD and the cervidae deer farms here in the Ag Bill. And she came up with a compromise that I think works pretty well. My only concern is that if and when this live animal test is produced and it's reliable, the language in the amendment says that it must be approved by the commissioners of both Agriculture and the Department of Natural Resources. And the DNR folks told us in committee that they didn't know if they had any or maybe one veterinarian in the entire DNR lineup of staff. So I'm a little concerned that they may not have the expertise to partially determine if this live test is good to go. So what my amendment to the amendment does is it just deletes the DNR commissioner as having to approve the live test when it becomes available for CWD, Madam Chair.
Discussion. Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if there's one thing I've learned in the CWD discussion, it's that there are numerous stakeholders. And some of those stakeholders are the Department of Ag, the DNR, and the Board of Animal Health. And what I've learned is there are three, and you have to have the triangle of three, because if you cut one out, that's not going to work, and we're not going to be able to move this forward. It's a serious issue, and we have to have a serious response, and I'm very hopeful that with the language that we have in the bill, we're able to move forward on this, and so I would ask people to reject or to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lewick moves to amend the Poppe amendment to Senate File number 2226, and the amendment is coded A48.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to echo Representative Anderson's comments about working together, and particularly Chair Poppe's done a good job here. What my amendment would do, and first let me introduce, and I'm just going to hold it up here. This is on the Department of Agriculture website. It's a 41-page study that was finished in 2015 that looked at the issues we were having in agriculture. So basically, we got about a 5-year look back that we don't have a good hard study and data on. So what my amendment does would simply take some dollars and move them over and ask the Department of Ag to update this livestock industry study. And with a particular emphasis, and I think Chair Poppe has mentioned this several times already, we've got some really adverse market conditions that are affecting all across ag, all the way across. And so we got 5 years that we don't have current data on, and a study that will produce recommendations. So what I'd simply ask is that we update that study with an emphasis on making sure that they come back to us beginning of next session with some clear recommendations on what we can do to continue to wrestle with these adverse market conditions. With that, I would ask a roll call vote on this particular item.
Representative Luick requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Luick. Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think it's a great idea. I just don't think it's the right idea at this point in time. So I think we will have the opportunity next year when we meet in committee to be able to discuss this further and perhaps provide some additional funding at that time. But at this point, I would ask people to vote against this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. Hassan votes no. The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying Poppe amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Representative McDonald, sorry, did not see you. Representative McDonald, to the underlying Poppe amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hoppe, if you would yield to her question.
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Representative Poppe, in your statement regarding the amendment, you mentioned that you said that the farmers, would be asked to remove or destroy the animals. The question is, they would be asked or would they be told? In the language on the bill, it says they'd be told. So just if you could clarify that.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative McDonald. Under the bill, they are required to depopulate, but the additional language allows them to have an option for if and when a live test is available, and that's approved by the 3 entities.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on this amendment, Chair Poppe, thank you for the conversation that we had over our break, and then also for the work that you did with this amendment. You take our considerations very seriously, and we appreciate that, and I ask for your support on the amendment.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Keel moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, and the amendment is coded A15.
Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. A15 just addresses the prohibited pesticide use and adding to that the metro regional parks. Instead of just the outdoor recreational, it adds metro regional parks to it.
Representative Poppe.
I think this is an acceptable amendment, so we can just vote yes.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A39.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. This amendment was kind of a last-minute thing. We found out yesterday that there was a group that wanted to serve some ice cream here in St. Paul, and they wanted to give it away free, and it was prepackaged ice cream. And when they went to find out if they could do it here, they were told to check with the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture and get a permit to give away some free ice cream. And we found out that if the ice cream had to be scooped, the permit had to come from the Department of Health, and if it was prepackaged, it had to come from the Department of Agriculture. And they just wanted to give it away for nothing. So we had this amendment drawn up, Madam Speaker, and it wasn't too long. I got a call from the Department of Ag, and the situation has been clarified, and the free ice cream giveaway can go ahead as proceeded. So, Madam Speaker, I would want to withdraw this amendment.
Representative Anderson withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A1.
Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker and members, getting to a more serious note again here. This amendment deals with a fertilizer research organization called AFRAC, Agricultural Fertilization and Research Council. And Madam Speaker, I do have an amendment to the amendment. Could we introduce that as well?
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson moves to amend his amendment to Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A16.
Representative Anderson.
Again, thank you, Madam Speaker. What this amendment to the amendment does is it deletes a couple sections of the Ag Bill, and what those sections did was open up this AFRAC research account to projects from the metro area. And not that I'm against fertilizer research in the metro area, but some background on this AFRAC council. It is not funded by state money. It is funded mainly by farmers with an assessment of 40 cents a ton on fertilizer we purchase to put on our crops in this state. We have about 25 or 26 million acres of cropland in Minnesota. We grow corn, soybeans, wheat, sugar beets, you name it, in this wonderful state for agriculture. And that assessment raises about $1 million a year in Minnesota. And the AFRAC Council puts out an RFP every year. The last one was the deadline was last November 30th. And they allocate these grant dollars to projects that they deem to be important to Minnesota. And this 12-member council is made up of crop production retailers, independent crop consultants, corn growers, Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, Minnesota Grain and Feed, Minnesota irrigators, soybean growers, wheat growers, potato growers, and the sugar beet folks. As you can see, a very almost total emphasis on production agriculture on that council. And some of the worthwhile projects that they have funded recently include nitrogen response and soil microbial activity in potato production, variable rate technology in corn evaluation, research in cultivated wild rice for nitrogen, perennial ryegrass growth and development influenced by phosphorus, optimizing nitrogen management in sweet corn production, advanced intensive management of corn in the continuous corn rotation on irrigated sand, optimizing the use of polymer-coated urea, which holds that nitrogen in place longer to help prevent that going where it shouldn't be going. Also, the timing applications effects of nitrogen application in corn production and soil quality, and also long-term soil testing, monitoring in Minnesota, the various cropping systems we have in the state. Madam Chair and Speaker and members, they don't take in enough money to fund all the projects that they have applications for. And the mission of this AFRAC Council is to fund research and education on agricultural fertility that's environmentally and economically sound. So I would, in my amendment to the amendment, remove that language so that this council can focus again on production agriculture and have the funding that is primarily put in by farmers go to production agriculture. I'd call for a roll call, Madam
Representative
Speaker.
Anderson requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is something that we have in committee. We talked about it, and I would like to take it into conference as it currently stands, so I would ask you to vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 52 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying Anderson amendment, any further discussion? Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. What the amendment does is extend the window for the AFRAC Council from 5 years to 10 years. It has been in existence for 10 years, and we asked to have that 10-year contract moved out another 10 years, but the language in the bill calls for it to have a 5-year extension. And that's a bit problematic because some of the research that they do deals with phosphorus, for example, and phosphorus is a long-lasting nutrient that takes a while to build up in the soil, and we just don't think 5 years of certainty is long enough for some of these long-range fertilizer projects, and hopefully we can work on that. But Madam Speaker, I would call for a green vote on the amendment.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Again, I would ask you to vote against this, but I would say certainly research is important, and certainly it's something that we all learn from and are happy to be able to support. But 5 years is more typical to what the extension is that we usually give. And again, I would ask you to vote no.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poston moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A8.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the A8 amendment removes some burdensome nursery stock labeling language that pertains to nursery plants being labeled pollinator friendly. We all care about our pollinators, but this is going to be burdensome for a couple of reasons. We're the only state that's going to require this label, and our nursery stock inventory comes from all over the upper Midwest. So it puts a burden on our nursery stock sellers all over the state. It also puts a detectable level at a point that science hasn't even confirmed that it affects our pollinators. So with that, I'd ask you to support this amendment.
Representative Tabke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Poston. I stand to oppose this amendment. I hope everyone will vote no on this amendment. This section of the bill is set up to have plant materials or nursery stock must not be labeled or advertised with false or misleading information, including but not limited to scientific name, etc. And so what this amendment will do is remove an entire section that has truth in advertising for the plant materials that's sold in nurseries and at retailers across the state of Minnesota. There are some changes being made in the bill to make sure that pollinator-friendly plants are in fact pollinator friendly plants, and we support that in this bill, and I hope everyone will vote red on this amendment.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, if the science said that this level of systemic insecticide affected our pollinators, I would probably agree with this labeling request. But we don't have the science that says we need to have this, and we will, again, be the only state that will have it, and our nursery stock comes from all over the upper Midwest. And again, we will be the only ones that will require this labeling, which puts a burden on the nursery stock growers and the nursery stock sellers. And Madam Speaker, I would ask for a roll call, please.
Representative Poston requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Keel moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A9.
Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, A9 has to do with the outdoor recreational pesticide damage, and in the bill it is enhanced, and this just removes the enhanced charges. Thank you.
Representative Wozlowick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to this amendment. This is not new law that we're creating here. The public lands belong to all of us, and we need to ensure that they're protected from pesticide drift and available, clean and available to us and future generations. So I would encourage members to vote red on this.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Somebody's booby-trapping my mic, I think. It doesn't work half the time. I'm wondering if Representative Lesh would yield to a question.
Representative Lesh will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Lesh, this is enhancing a penalty, and I'm just wondering, do you recall this bill ever coming, this provision ever coming to your committee?
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Scott. I don't recall that provision in judiciary.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield to a question?
Representative Hansen will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, first of all, is this your provision, and if so, did it come to the Judiciary and Civil Law Committee?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, yes, this is my provision, and no, it did not go to the Civil Law Committee. This is dealing with the administrative penalties that are existing authority within the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the clarification.
Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a little clarification here. I do know that there's pesticides and other chemicals sprayed that may drift over onto public land, but if you're living in greater Minnesota, you would know that biggest part of our problem for our farmers is coming from public land because they're not managed properly. They're allowed to, I'll basically run wild, if that's the term you want to use. So a lot of the pests and a lot of even the weeds and stuff that our farmers are dealing with are coming because there's a lack of management on state land. And so this is, I support Representative Keel's amendment. I think this is unfair to put this through. So I hope that you'll vote for the amendment.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a classic of a solution looking for a problem. In testimony, the Department of Ag told us that since 2013, they have had 6 complaints of drift onto public lands. So I think in the space of nearly 6 years, 1 complaint a year is not a huge, serious issue. So again, I would support the amendment to take that language out of the bill, Madam Speaker.
Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we in agriculture, when we are controlling a pesticide like Representative Green talked about, we try our best to manage that in a very specific way. We have no intention of damaging anything that's on someone else's land, whether it's public or private. I can tell you when that happens and there's a damage in a field, we seek many different opinions, including the University of Minnesota, to come and test to see exactly what happened. Because while it might look like something was killed, it might not be specifically identified by just your eyeballs. And so we work hard to make sure that we have not done any damage, and as Representative Green pointed out, try to control some things that often the public does not. Our different entities that are running public lands do not control, and becomes a problem for all of us. And there still is a penalty. There is a penalty as a farmer if I overspray on my neighbor's land. There still is a conversation. There still is cost. So this is just enhancing something that, like Representative Anderson said, has only happened 6 times in how many, 5 years? It's not common, and we're once again in search of a problem that isn't there. So I would say vote green, and Madam Speaker, I would like a roll call.
Representative Keel requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, so we are going to do more to farmers with more regulation, more penalties here. What are the enhanced penalties that you're going to do to farmers in the bill? I'm looking at 18, I'm trying to find 18D.40. I assume it's new language in the bill. I haven't found it.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Drazkowski. This does not differentiate between farmers or urban applicators or rights-of-way applicators, and what it requires is you have to go through the same requirement. The Department of Ag has to prove damages, and once those damages are approved, then it would double the fine. It doesn't say whether it's for farmers or whether it's for public entities or whoever causes the drift, and that they've proved the damages, then they double the fine.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen continue to yield?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. So, how much is the fine, and how much are you going to double it to in the bill?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Drazkowski, that authority is provided to the Department of Agriculture. I believe in testimony they said between $300 or $600. Usually they have a stepped enforcement where the first type of penalty is a warning letter. You have to get to a point where maybe there's multiple actions that have occurred before the financial penalty happens. So I believe the range is between $300 and $600. That would be doubled. They have to show the cause. They have to show the damage before that occurs. So,
Representative Drazkowski.
Would he yield for one more question, Madam Speaker?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you. So, Representative Hansen, you used to work for the Department of Agriculture. I used to work for the Extension Service. You and I would talk on the phone now and then about different things, and now we talk on the phone more about other things and sometimes about these things. But we know that the diagnosis of the damage or reason for death of different plants in different situations cannot be 100% conclusively arrived at. There's not a test to say, take this leaf sample and prove that it's damage from XYZ herbicide. So how do you avoid the pitfalls that are going to happen here, especially when you got a large fine, $600 or maybe $1,200 fine to an applicator when it's based largely on the visual appearance of the leaf and the distribution in the plot or in the area that you're looking at. So help me rectify that.
Representative Hansen.
thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Drazkowski, those old days just seem like yesterday. They were good times, weren't they? I think that I have confidence in the Department of Ag staff, both the people in the field that respond to the incident that occurs and to the science in the laboratory where they respond. They have to prove that it was a pesticide drift. If it's not drift, if they can't, it's not just the visual. They're going through and they're looking at, they have to prove it. And when there's that improvement, they go through the process where the responsible party is agreeing to that violation. And when that violation would occur, what we're saying here is that simply you double it.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Hansen, what I think I heard is that the responsible party has to agree that they actually sprayed in that area or caused it. Is that what you said? Would he yield, Madam Speaker?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When they go through a violation process, you have an investigation and you have the Department of Ag staff working, taking the samples, come back to the lab to test it. They have to prove it. And when they prove it, they do the settlement, and the settlement is agreed upon. So you are having the regulatory agency and the responsible party that are agreeing to that settlement at the point because it's an administrative process, not a criminal.
Representative Driscoski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. New votes no. There being 53 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment, and the amendment is coded A30.
Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I found it. My vision is getting better. The A30 amendment deals with a topic that's really near and dear to me. I represent an area of west central Minnesota, strong agricultural, and the area of western Stearns County, a lot of dairy production. In fact, Stearns County is the leading dairy producing county in the state, and I believe they are about 20th in the nation in terms of production in a county. And what the amendment does, Madam Speaker, the A30, is put a little bit more money into a program to allow Second Harvest Heartland to purchase milk and other protein products, and they in turn distribute that to food shelves around the state. And the reason I tied dairy into this is that, as we all know, we've talked about on the floor before, the dairy is certainly facing some tough times, critically low prices. They've been seeing that for the past 4 years. And we just have too much milk for the demand that's out there. And in committee testimony, Second Harvest Heartland said that they already get about $1 million from the state to purchase milk to provide to the food shelves around the state. And they told us that this gives them funding for about half the year. Half the year they can purchase milk at a very low price, bulk price, and help folks that pick up some of their protein needs at the food shelves. So I thought another $1 million would certainly do well to allow Second Harvest to provide milk around the state on a year-round basis. And to do that, again, I realize that we can't increase funding in the bill here on the floor. So I looked at a couple other programs and basically took funding from them. And again, nothing against these programs we're taking it from. The Urban and Youth Agriculture, Good Food Access Program, and the Farm to School Program, which, by the way, in the governor's recommendations, the Farm to School Program did not have any funding at all in his recommendation. So we're transferring about $1.3 million to Second Harvest to purchase milk and protein products again so that they can provide dairy and protein to the food shelves around the state on a year-round basis. And again, it would be, I would admit, pretty symbolic in terms of the demand that it would do for dairy in this nation. But again, it's something we can do in our way to stimulate demand for milk and dairy products here in Minnesota. And Madam Speaker, I would call for a roll call vote.
Representative Anderson requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion. Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I would urge a no vote. I appreciate Representative Anderson's concern for dairy farmers. I share that concern too. I think it's important to remember that we have $10 million for relief for dairy farmers in the jobs bill as well. And the provisions in this bill that would be deleted are very, very important. Farm to School, for instance, is working to get more local foods into schools. That's good for our children. They'd have more access to very healthy food for their meals every day. It's good for local farmers who are growing foods for local communities. It's also good for local economies, as these dollars will be circulating in local economies all across the state. So we need to keep these provisions, and I urge a no vote.
Further discussion, Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And this amendment points out to the issue that we have within the agriculture budget itself. The Ag Committee, we have such a small budget. Whenever great ideas come forth to fund the various programs, specifically addressing the issue that pertains to production ag, we scramble to find those dollars to invest in these various areas. The monies that are redirected in this amendment are coming from some very good programs, there's no question about it, but it doesn't eliminate the total funding for those programs. What it does is it redirects the additional increase to those programs to an area that desperately needs attention. So once again, Madam Speaker, this points out the issues that we have within the agriculture budget itself. Thank you.
Representative Vang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I ask that you vote no to this amendment. This puts one community against another community. It takes money away from communities that has been historically disinvested in. The money from Agri is an investment for emerging areas of agriculture critical to our state. It's a direct investment in our farmers, our kids, and health of our communities that will sustain and build wealth and wellness here in our state, and I ask that you vote no.
Representative Anderson.
Just a quick final comment, Madam Speaker. Again, nothing against these programs, but I think we need to prioritize the farmers we have out there across our great state that are trying to survive and stay in business and do what we can for them. And I would encourage a green vote on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a roll call. The clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 52 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. I'd like to correct the record on the prior amendment, the A9. I incorrectly stated Representative New's intent as voting no. She intended to vote yes, so the A9 amendment failed 54-73. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended. The amendment is coded A12.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Madam Speaker. And again, we're looking in the cushions here to find some additional funding. This one pertains to the noxious weed program that is part of this bill. And we very much appreciate the funding allocation of $1.8 million for this program, but I think the balance of how the funding is allocated is a little bit not the way I'd like to see it. And what makes this, I think, even more important, last week another find of Palmer amaranth was discovered in Minnesota. And what makes this one different and I think a little bit more scary is that it was found in a feed residual component of manure, whatever. So the seed is coming into the state in various forms, in feed, livestock waste, things like that. And the seed was found. But the good news is we've now developed a test that can identify Palmer amaranth quicker and with less cost. Instead of sending seed to Iowa or wherever they used to send it, we can now identify that seed more precisely with a test here right in state.
Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker,
Representative Grossell, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise on just the decorum. When somebody is speaking, it's hard to hear when there's phone conversations going on.
Thank you, Representative Grossell. Members, will you please take conversations off of the House floor into the retiring room or into the alcoves? Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I thought I had everybody's rapt attention here, but anyway, we'll continue. What this amendment does, it transfers some of the money in the noxious weed program. Currently, the department keeps well over half the funding for 4.5 FTEs and some other testing, and the actual grants to local government units is about 40% of the entire grant. So what the amendment does, Madam Speaker, is that it evens things out. It adds $75,000 to the grants for local governments and takes that like amount off the allocation to the department here in St. Paul. And Madam Speaker, again, I would like a roll call on this
Representative
amendment.
Anderson requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Brand.
Madam Speakers and members, and in opposition to the amendment, I would just like to highlight the need for staff to also be present.
Representative Brand, you need to move your computer so your mic works.
Oh, gotcha. All right, sorry about that. I'll restate what I said, Madam Speaker. Members, I stand in opposition to this amendment today because I would just want to highlight the need for staff going out to the local counties and local units of government as well to also help out. There is an extra $75,000 will go to local units of government through the grant process already in the $900,000 per year bill. And so what I would just say is, members, please vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poston moves to amend Senate File Number 2226 as amended, and the amendment is coded A33.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the A33 amendment comes as a result of the legislative auditor's audit of the Board of Animal Health that you all received a few months ago. One of the auditor's recommendations was to make the board larger than it was and more inclusive. Currently, there are 5 board members. This amendment would change it to 9 board members. It would make the board makeup be 1 beef producer, 1 pork producer, 1 dairy producer, 1 poultry producer, 1 deer or elk producer, and 2 large animal veterinarians, a specific swine veterinarian, and a specific poultry veterinarian. And I think this makes the board very inclusive and much better than the 5. This has been very well vetted. I've talked to the Farm Bureau, the Farmers Union, the Board of Animal Health, Dr. Thompson, the Executive Director, and all the producer groups involved. Thank you.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would ask that you vote no for a couple of reasons. One is this is a change that we haven't heard in committee, and it needs to go through government operations as well because we're expanding the size of the Board of Animal Health. I always appreciate Representative Poston, his creative ideas, and comes to the committee with thoughts and suggestions, and I think this is one that we should be looking at next year in committee. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Poston.
Thank you, Chair Poppe. I hope that we can take this up when we come back next year. I think it's important. I think the OLA is right, that we need to make this board larger and more inclusive. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lewick moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment, and the amendment is coded A34.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What the A34 amendment does is it would redirect $50,000 to, again, not to repeat myself, but to do some more work on this livestock industry study, to bring it up to date, to look at the past 5 years. It's really important, and particularly we understand that we've got some really adverse market conditions that are really putting a strain across the industry. So with that, I would ask for a roll call vote on that, Madam Chair.
Representative Lewick requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lewick moves to amend his amendment to Senate File Number 2226. The amendment to the amendment is coded A43.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This makes an adjustment to another pressing area we have, and it would look like we would probably be better served if we made a bigger investment in increasing our state-sanctioned meat inspection force. The governor came in asking for about $250,000 increase. This would simply push some more dollars over in that direction. And the importance of that, folks, is our small producers, in many occasions, what they would like to do is be able to sell their product, their livestock, but the average customer no longer has the capacity to process that meat. So in order to get there from a live animal, whether it's poultry or side of beef or whatever, out of a food safety perspective, we need a meat inspector involved there. And the Minnesota Department of Ag does a good job they augment the federal inspectors. So what this does would be to help out the governor's request here a little bit, strengthen that. And the other important thing to remember is those dollars are matched by federal dollars. So this is a 2-for-1 deal. With that, Madam Chair, I would certainly ask that we get a green vote on this.
Representative Cleavorn.
Madam Chair, or Madam Speaker, excuse me. I rise to oppose this amendment to the amendment. In our bill, we have granted already $300,000, which, as the representative stated, would be matched federally. There are adequate funds for the meat and poultry inspectors in this bill. Thank you. I urge a red vote on the amendment to the amendment.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This, I think, could be kind of a ray of good hope in agriculture. We had a meeting up in Alexandria during the Easter break, and Ag Commissioner Peterson was there. It was put on by Farmers Union, and it was brought up by people in the audience that we are lacking in terms of slaughtering capacity in rural Minnesota. If you want to get a cow or a pig taken care of, butchered and back home for your own use, you have to get on a list 3 or 4 months in advance. I mean, we are having a shortage of locker plants and folks that do that type of thing all across the state. And not putting words in Commissioner Peterson's mouth, but I think he was impressed that the demand is out there for additional capacity to move into this area of agricultural expansion, this locally grown, farmer to consumer, locally grown meat. And to do that, we have to have more locker plants and people that can do that type of thing. So I think this is a good place to put this money. Again, we have to prioritize what will do the most good to help farmers and those that work with farmers in Minnesota. So I support the amendment.
Representative Backer.
Madam Speaker and members, I would support that. One of the things that we are seeing on the border is we have ag individuals and farmers who are getting their beef, poultry processed in another state because they can't get it here. So this makes sense. I would ask for a green vote.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm just going to speak to the underlying issue here, $25,000 for the Farmer Legal Aid Hotline. We have farmers all over the state that are critically in need of support and assistance, and legal assistance is one of those needs. So adding $25,000 to the inspectors, although helpful, doesn't actually hire another inspector. But what $25,000 does for the farmer legal assistance is provide assistance to farmers all throughout the state. And I would ask that you vote against this amendment.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment to the amendment is not adopted. On the underlying amendment, Representative Lewick.
Well, we'll continue to work on good ideas. If we can't increase the amount of boots on the ground out there for the meat inspection element, then we certainly need to continue to look at the adverse market conditions and get this study up to date. So with that, and again, I believe this is a roll call vote, I would ask for a green vote.
Representative Cleaborn.
Madam Speaker, to the main amendment. As many of you know, I work as a mediator and I deal in conflict all across our state. And as Chair Poppe has mentioned many times on this floor and in committee, our families are struggling. And to remove the money and the funds that would pay for a hotline for legal assistance would be an inappropriate move at this time. I would encourage all of the members to support our family farmers and take a green vote on this amendment, on the main amendment. Thank you. I'm sorry, a red vote on this amendment and support our farmers. Thank you. I appreciate that.
The clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Miller moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A19-0500.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I go to my amendment, I do want to make a quick comment that I think you've heard before this body. And I want to thank Representative Chair Poppe for the work that she does in agriculture. This is a very difficult thing. Madam Speaker, it's kind of...
Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor into the alcoves or the retiring room. Thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Anderson did say that he did have rapt attention on me, so I thank you for that. No, you don't have to listen to me, just please. Anyway, so I do want to say, us on this side of the aisle do all hail Representative Poppe as an incredible chair, someone who's really trying to work. I think in her original speech, she said this in committee before, that she opens a door for very strong conversations, and she did allow that. I know that on the subject that my amendment addresses, I got pretty strong and maybe even pushed it up against the edge a little bit, but she accepted that. And so as we move forward with this overall bill, I just want to commend Chair Poppe for the great work that she's done with this side of the aisle. Now, having said that, members, what my amendment does is it just simply is a DE to the Article 2, which is the Farm Survey portion of this bill. And members, if you like meat and if you like small businesses, then I would encourage you to support my amendment here. And here's why.
So the original intent, when this came forward this year, there was a bill, I believe, by Representative Becker-Finn. It may have been someone else because it kind of moved around. But the bill that originally came out was to effectively just get rid of this industry and even buy it out. There was talk about that at one time. And when that didn't go over real well, we kind of backed it off. And it was a little bit bad, but it kind of was going to regulate it into extinction, and we didn't go with that. So we backed it off a little bit more, and then we backed off a little bit more. So what you're seeing here is an effort to come up with, as we say, peace in the valley or good compromise or something like that. I just don't think that it's there yet. I think this needs to be worked on a little bit more. And to give an analogy, a word picture, I was thinking about this, and in this last Christmas, my wife and I, we decided we were going to finally get a new fake Christmas tree. I don't like fake Christmas trees, but we decided to do that. This makes sense. This is Representative Lucero. This is an homage to you, I suppose, but I hope people understand this. So you have the trees in the store, and you have all sorts of them. You have ones that have just nice white lights, and they're gorgeous. You have some that are colored lights, some with ornaments, some with garlands, some with little animals on them, whatever, but they're all these nice coordinated ones. And off to the edge, I looked over and there was this one that I call the compromise Christmas tree. Because what it had is it had everything and then some hanging on this Christmas tree. It was the most ungodly, horrible looking Christmas tree. But I'm guessing if they put it out there, someone bought it. And why? Because it was going to be the Christmas tree that made everyone at least a little bit happy. I tell my wife all the time, I said, if you want to see good compromise is when everyone's a little bit unhappy. Members, this is a good attempt at trying to deal with the problem, chronic wasting disease, which is a very serious problem, and as an ag state, we certainly need to address. But I think what we have is basically an ungainly Christmas tree here. Here's what my biggest issues are. Number one, there has been no evidence presented that farm survey are the cause, or certainly the primary cause, for CWD in Minnesota. At best, there's some anecdotal evidence, and at best, the anecdotal evidence actually has to do more with the DNR or things coming from over the state lines, which I think you do address somewhere. But there's no science that says this is where it's happening. We're going to heavily regulate and make an industry spend a lot of money on that. The second thing that I've had a problem with this is neither in here, and I don't believe in environment, everything that we're talking about with Farm Survey Day here, which are deer, elk, reindeer, I don't think I've forgotten any of the animals that are associated with this. These are all in the wild also, and I don't see anything that the legislature is doing. Now, I understand that we can't fence in wild cervidae. We can't fence in wild deer. But one of the elements in here is that we depopulate a herd. Well, obviously we can't depopulate an entire deer herd in Minnesota, but that points to that problem. You can get rid of an entire deer farm, and the problem might be the wild deer that was just hanging out in the grove on the other side. So I think that this is incomplete. One final thing, members, that I have a general overall problem with on this bill is I see trends here. And if we decide that we are basically going to go after a single industry in general across the state of Minnesota, but specific to farming, go after a specific herd, what happens when there's another animal, a wild animal, that shows some problems of migration of a major disease? Are we going to do the same things to hogs? Are we going to do the same things? Are we going to do the same thing eventually to cattle? This is an industry, members, that is very important to 3/4 probably geographically of the state, if not more. And I think this is a bad trend. So members, I hope to gain your support. Representative Poppe, with all due respect, I think we can work a little more on this, and this is just not ready at this time. Thank you.
Discussion. Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask for a roll call.
Representative Poppe requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Poppe.
And I would ask you to vote against this amendment. This is a critically serious issue. Chronic wasting disease is not something we can put our heads in the sand and think that it's just going to magically disappear. It's already been found in our state. There's nothing in this bill that says it's all due to Farm Survey Day. It's trying to accommodate how the Farm Survey are treated and what we can do about our livestock industry in the state while also recognizing that we have a cherished hunting tradition. And I think that trying to find the right answers moving forward is what we should be looking toward rather than just ignoring the problem altogether. So I would ask people to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not putting my head in the sand. I'm not trying to ignore this. I'm not trying to be the grumpy old man that says just don't do anything. I'm saying this issue is a big issue with chronic waste disease. But this issue, if we're going to talk about Farm Survey, we have to talk about the Wild Survey also. Not because it's fair, not because, what about them and we only pick on farmers, which I think we do in this body a lot, okay? But that's not what we're doing here. We are moving forward with some very serious policy. I understand if you depopulate, I think they said each animal is worth about $2,000 or $3,000, and we have no way to give them that money back if we destroy that entire population. So I agree, this is a very serious issue. But we are moving in a very serious direction with policy that's going to affect the people that are addressing this, and I don't think that it's ready yet. So that's what I'm asking, Madam Speaker and members, is that we do take that serious look. This is not in ignorance of that. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And to the author of the amendment, I think you made, in your opening remarks, you made the case on why we should leave this in the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee. And Chair Poppe has done a fantastic job bringing the groups together, if you will. We're very concerned. We've heard testimony from producers that are saying they're fighting for their lives here. And I understand that. However, I do feel more comfortable having this still under the jurisdiction of the Agriculture Committee and within the Agriculture Bill. So I'm going to be voting against this amendment. I trust that Chair Poppe continues to work with all sides on this issue to find a workable solution. CWD is a serious issue. We all recognize that, to both in the wild and those individuals who are within the industry themselves. And I also want to thank Representative Eklund for attending that meeting that we had with the Board of Animal Health, the Department of Agriculture, the University of Minnesota. And so we're going to continue working on this to find common ground and address this very serious issue. So I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this is pretty amazing to me. I had a little bit of a comment here with Representative Anderson and with what Representative Hamilton said. Look at what we're doing, members, to agriculture, okay? Look at what we're doing. I'm having people asking me to do something here, which I'm going to do in a moment, okay? And you know why I have to do it? I don't have to do it because it's good for agriculture or keeping them in line. It's not good for hunters or keeping things with chronic. We're not talking about chronic wasting disease. We are talking right now that if there is a roll call vote for this, people are going to be crucified for the vote. And you know what? They are going to be. We should be ashamed of ourselves, members. We are here to legislate for the betterment of Minnesota, not whether or not someone's going to send out a postcard. And again, I'm not criticizing the people that are worried about those postcards because they show up and they're very real. But this is a moment to understand that this is the problem with our government right now. That we aren't legislating for the betterment of our state, we're legislating for the betterment of our position. So, Madam Speaker, with great reluctance and disappointment, I'm going to withdraw this amendment.
Representative Miller withdraws his amendment. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hamilton moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A2.
Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And what the A2 amendment does is that this would just make sure that there would be some dollars available, whether it's from the state or from the federal government. In the event we would have to do a total depop on herds. However, Madam Speaker, because of the work that's going on, I'm going to withdraw this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hamilton moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A3.
Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And just very quickly, my message out to the Department of Agriculture and the Board of Animal Health. What this would do is this would produce zones or create zones all across the state of Minnesota, similar to what we've done, whether we were dealing with bovine tuberculosis or back when we were addressing with pseudorabies or some of the other issues. Madam Chair, but again, in light of what's taken place, I'm going to withdraw this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lewick moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This simply would put a completion date for the requirement that's in the bill right now for double fencing, and the reason, and it would put it out at December 2020. And I'll just very briefly, I raise beef cattle. I've got 4 miles of perimeter fence, and that separates my cattle from getting on the highway, getting onto places where I'm liable for what they do. The problem with what we're doing here right now is the moment that the governor signs the ag bill, if this is in there, then these folks have to have a double perimeter fence. In order to put that kind of fence in, you need to clear trees back, because you don't build fences under trees because the trees will fall on them. So this isn't just a 20-minute evolution, particularly if you've got miles of fencing. For example, right now, I can tell you that about 3/4 of that perimeter fence I have right now, if I need to get out there to work on it, I'm going to have to do it in hip boots. Now, to go in and put another fence, move timber back and that type of thing is just it's not going to work. So this is just simply an effort to put just a rationalization in here and make sure that we don't just instantly put somebody out of compliance the day the governor signs this. So I would hope we could take this amendment.
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I ask you to reject this amendment. This is a recommendation by both the National Survey and Farm System, and it'll do two things. It'll protect the survey, the farm survey from escaping, but it'll also protect keep the wild survey from also entering the farm. I ask you to reject the amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Lewick moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A5.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This simply removes the moratorium on licensing any survey farms that's in the bill right now. Folks, at this point, I can tell you there is no line of people standing trying to create a new survey farm. And what we need to look at here is we've got circumstances where you may have a family, parents, grandparents own a farm. They may be in a position where they're going to try to transfer that farm. And we're talking about operations that have been there for 35, 40 years. And just so you understand, at this point, and a knock on wood, there are no survey farms right now with chronic wasting disease. The last one that we had an issue with was depopulated last week. So again, not going to belabor this. We've got a lot of good things in here. Chair Poppe's amendment in particular. We're just trying to make sure we don't make a bad situation worse by complicating a family situation where they would simply trying to pass what they're doing down to the next generation and complicate the process of transferring a license or that type of thing. So I would ask that members support this amendment.
Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would just ask that you vote against the amendment. I think that it's been clear that we have an understanding that we have a livestock industry that is concerned about their future, and we want to make sure that they can continue to thrive and survive. But at this point, I'd ask that we reject this amendment.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I thought we had kind of a good thing going here. But these were two amendments that we offered in good faith to kind of soften the blow on survey farmers. And the one before this about the fencing requirements kind of torques me off in the sense that come July 1st, these deer farmers are going to be out of compliance. Give me a break. This is going to be a $80,000, $90,000 expense for a deer farmer to put up a double fence, and by July 1st, they're going to be out of compliance. I mean, there's got to be some common sense here to allow time to get that fence put up. And the moratorium thing is difficult for a deer farmer, but we thought we were making some progress here, but I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I wanted to speak to Miller's amendment before we withdrew it, and I'll speak to this one for the same reason. When we have wild animals that are similar to animals that we raise in farming, this reaction is to take care of the only problem we can take care of, which is the farmed animal. And my concern is that this sets a dangerous precedent. And if you like bacon, like I like bacon, in my district we have a lot of hog farmers, second only to Representative Gunther's district, which is like the pork capital of the country. There's a wild animal out there called a javelina hog that carries disease. What happens when the javelina hog makes it to Minnesota and we decide that we should get out of farming hogs? That's a concern, and this is what we see, these extra regulations burdening Cervidae farmers. I have Cervidae farms in my district. I've got one down the road from me that farms reindeer. And in their business, it isn't just farming for meat. They actually bring their deer all over the country. That's their business. They bring them to shields and to parades. And when you have restrictions on how deer can be moved about, it impacts their business that they have worked their life to build, a successful one. We need to be very careful when we start regulating farms because of what's happening in the wild when we don't address both equally. So I support this amendment and any amendment that helps our Cervidae farmers today. Thank you.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Chair Poppe would yield to a question, please.
She will yield. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Poppe, just to be clear, I want to make sure I know what I'm doing here. What is the effective date of this provision?
Representative Poppe.
Madam Speaker, I would state that it would be the date that we would typically have for when the bills get processed through, and we would start on July 1 unless it's otherwise indicated.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Chair Poppe, I'm not trying to put you on the spot by doing this, but to the comments that other people have made, if this goes into effect on July 1st or whatever the date is, at that time, as I read the bill, someone's going to be in violation and there's going to be possibly a penalty or whatever. And I just think that what we're doing here is wrong, members. We shouldn't be putting something in place that is going to all of a sudden make people be in violation and so forth. I don't think that should be our intention at all. We need to demonstrate good faith that we can work with folks and we understand the situation that they're in. Members, I recognize that there is a problem with CWD here in the state. I get it, totally, 100%. But the vast majorities of these cervid farms go through extensive, rigorous testing on every animal that's dead, brain stems and everything is tested, and the vast majority of these farming operations are abiding by all the rules. They don't have any CWD inside of their fences. And what we're doing here, members, is we're just not being very thoughtful and respectful of what they're doing. Members, we need to do something different. Thank you.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have similar concerns. Representative Poppe, thank you for putting the bill together, but I think the committee and the outcome of the bill cowered to the deer hunters. And our farmers are going to get run over because of it. Now, what we have going on here in this state is we have finger pointing going on. There's more deer hunters than there are farmers. There's many more deer hunters than there are farmers. They're shouting louder and exercising their political force beyond what farmers can do to defend themselves. The problem isn't inside the fence, it's outside of the fence. We have the government already inspecting, annually in many cases, the deer farms inside of the fence. Well, those are the only deer that the government can get their hands on. So that seems to be the focus of this bill, at the behest of the deer hunters that want to say it's their fault. The problem is outside of the fence, not inside of the fence. As a matter of fact, when the environment bill comes up, I want to talk in more detail, but our government and our policies that we have enacted here, I believe, are partially to blame for the CWD proliferation in Minnesota. Not the farmers of the state of Minnesota. And we're going to regulate an entire farm industry out of the state with this bill. And Representative Poppe, I would vote for the bill if this provision wasn't in it. But this is a horrible provision. The Democrats are telling Minnesota farmers, we don't want your industry here because we're going to chase them out of this state. Like the taxpayers of Minnesota, they're going to go to other states, or they're just going to fold up. All because of political fear, and we capitulate to the large numbers of deer hunters in this state that want to point the finger and say it's agriculture's fault. Members, that's not the case. I know it, and you know it. We shouldn't be capitulating to political fear. And that's what's going on here. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I suspect and don't intend for you to change your mind, but Representative Poppe, if you would be so kind to at least consider this in conference. Our Sudovay farmers are not to be guilty before proven innocent. Many of them, as you know, take good care of their farms and good care of their deer and good care of their animals. They're not negligent. And by insisting they do double fencing by July 1st really is unfair. You know it. I know it. And in the bill, it really doesn't specifically say what consequences there are if they don't double fence. It does say that if a deer escapes more than twice, to remove or destroy all deer. Now, I would determine, or I would submit to you that the Department of Natural Resources could interpret that section of the bill, if they don't double fence and they're in violation, that all their animals would be destroyed. Read the language. It could be interpreted that way. So please consider this in conference, that extend the date for these Sudovay farmers for all over the state, and for the particular, the two of them, maybe there's three, but for sure two in my district. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Members, we are going to turn to the housing portion of the bill. We have reached the conclusion of the agriculture amendments. Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Articles 5 and 6 of this House file, which has been substituted for the Senate file, are the housing portion of the bill. We have combined ag and housing to match the Senate structure. And so I'm speaking to that portion of the bill. And yes, members, I thank the committee staff, always present in both of the alcoves now, both partisan and nonpartisan. They are always there, they are always responsive, working hard and giving us all of the information we need. Yes, I thank the members of the committee for active participation. But today, I'd especially like to thank citizens. Those advocacy groups who've worked hard, educated us, and made the case for the huge housing needs in this state so that everyone has a safe place to sleep at night. Nothing else in life goes well if we don't have that, a safe place to sleep at night. So special thanks to two groups, Homes for All and Minnesota Housing Partnership. And right now, that community is feeling discouraged. They had hoped for so much more. Their work is not done, nor is ours. So just a word about their message to us. Homes for All is a coalition of more than 200 organizations across the state advancing shared policy initiatives that lead to housing stability for all Minnesotans. And here is their message to us. Where we live impacts every aspect of our lives. The jobs we can access, the education our children receive, and the well-being of our growing senior population. Minnesota Housing Partnership has just finished their State of the State's housing for 2019, and they point out this. The gap between housing costs and incomes is growing, with people at the lowest incomes experiencing significant burdens. They point out Minnesota's top in-demand jobs don't pay enough to afford housing. Only 2 of the top 7 jobs pay enough to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And they point out high housing costs continue to put Minnesota seniors at risk. 57% of all senior renters and more than a quarter of all senior homeowners pay more than they can afford for their housing. We have updated statistics from the Minnesota Housing Partnership that say that more than 1 in 4, or 572,000 households in Minnesota, pay more than they can afford for housing. That number has grown by nearly 26,000 households from 2015 to 2017. Similarly, the Wilder Foundation's release of their report shows that from 2015 to 2018, in 3 years, homelessness in Minnesota has gone up a whopping 10%, 9% in the metro, and 13% in rural areas. And we know that number is probably larger in greater Minnesota because that senior population is experiencing this. The growing group of those who are homeless are over 55. So with that as background, members, I'll just speak briefly to Articles 5 and 6. This provides appropriations for the MHFA budget totaling $26 million over the biennium. $10 million of that is one-time spending. While there's a great need for access to affordable housing across the state, this bill is a start to addressing the systemic issues facing our state. And I'd like to just mention a few of those programs that the bill funds. One of those is the Challenge Program, and I want to acknowledge the work that Representative Gunther has done over the years for this program. I think you were a founder of it, as I recall, and he continues to advocate. It was created in 1999 to address the workforce housing shortage. Homework Starts with Home addresses a real problem. Nearly 8,700 students in Minnesota schools experienced homelessness in the 2017-2018 school year. This can significantly hinder a student's success. The University of Minnesota has done research. By the time a child reaches the 5th grade, if they've been homeless or highly mobile, they're achieving at the level of a 2nd grader who's been in stable housing. That is the contribution. So this supports efforts to identify, engage, and stabilize students experiencing homelessness and their families. Bridges. The Bridges Rental Assistance Program provides housing assistance for individuals with very low incomes and a mental illness. And in the bill, we create one new program. Representative Fisher has done the work on this. Minnesota Department of Health estimates that 700 children in Minnesota experience lead poisoning each year. The resulting health impacts can be costly over the years, potentially leading to the need for special education, disability, or Medicaid services during the child's lifetime. So members, there is so much. I have started to use a phrase that has been used in the 100% Energy campaign, but it fits this issue as well. And that is, to change everything, we need everyone. The problem is across the state and across all income levels for housing, but today we bring a small portion of that to it. And Madam Chair, I think there are 4 amendments to this.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Sandsteed moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A38.
Representative Sandstead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this amendment is being brought forth on behalf of several of my constituents that are in Itasca County. Recently, several of those individuals received notification from Glacier Park, of whom owns the property, or they lease land from Glacier Park, that their fees would be increasing exorbitantly, over 600% in the next 5 years. What this amendment does is it allows Itasca County to adopt an ordinance to regulate the fee increases. Should the county adopt this ordinance, they would limit the increases to no more than 10%, and in a 12-month period, and they would only, the owners, leasees would only be assessed one time a year. I ask for your support.
Discussion. Representative Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Sandsteed and I have spoken about this because we share Itasca County as our district. And in hearing her explain what's happening over in her, the eastern part of the district, I would support this amendment. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Tice moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A37.
And there's an amendment to the amendment. Would you like to take that?
Madam Speaker, yes, please.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Tice moves to amend her amendment to Senate File Number 2226. The amendment to the amendment is coded A45.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What this amendment does is it brings, we're talking about 37 now, right? Amendment 37?
The underlying amendment is the A37. The amendment to the amendment is the A45.
Okay. I'm going to talk to the A37 first. What this does is it brings the local housing match down to match the governor's recommendation, and then puts the rest of the money in the challenge grant and the workforce housing match. The reason I'd like to do this is I think it addresses more accurately the need that we have for workforce housing, and I hope that I can get your support.
Representative Hausman will yield. Representative Hausman.
Madam Speaker, yes, I support both the amendment and the underlying, which is necessary to clarify the money you're taking from local housing trust fund is one-time money, and so that means as you provide it to these other programs, that also needs to be one-time. So I support both the underlying and the main amendment. I think we have one other member who wants to speak to the value of the local housing trust fund. Hopefully we have more money at the end of the day and we don't have to take money from any one of the valuable programs to fund the others.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise with some heartburn about this amendment. The local housing trust fund is a tool for communities across the state to address their affordable housing challenges, whether that be in urban, suburban, or greater Minnesota areas. And it's a tool that we need to look at investing in and something that we had a lot of bipartisan support for. And an amendment like this, where we're taking from one valuable initiative and putting in another, I think just highlights a challenge we're facing here in housing, and that the need is significant, and we need to be doing more to invest in our housing all across the state to address our housing crisis. And so this highlights that and highlights the task ahead of us this session. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't disagree with Representative Howard. We just have a huge problem to take care of. But what I think we hear most is we just don't have workforce housing. And I don't think it really is going to compete as much as we think it is, because I think our communities will use the money in the same types of way. But I think just saying this is the urgency, this is what we're hearing a lot of. I know that Representative Keel and Representative Fabian have been talking a lot about the needs in their communities. And I think that we do better in taking, Chair Hausman was very generous in her appropriation, a lot more than the governor stated. And I think that we probably make a better point of saying this is really where our needs are, and we need to look into that so that we can find the housing that we need in the areas where there just isn't anything available. And the underlying amendment, I'm sorry I didn't talk to that before, is simply just saying that this is a one-time appropriation. So with that, I hope that you can support it. I understand Representative Howard's concerns. I'm not saying I don't get it, but I think that when I feel the urgency in housing, it is very much in the workforce housing area. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed to the amendment please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the underlying amendment, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Tice moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A31.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment requires that the $300,000 for a tenant hotline to be awarded through a competitive grant process. It requires it to supplement other sources and prohibits the grant from going to an entity that has a registered lobbyist. We were hearing a lot about Homeline, and Homeline is a service advocacy service / lobbyist group, and that is concerning to me. And I hope that we don't put other folks that addresses the same things maybe in a different way by just saying most of the money goes to Homeline. I think there's other, I'm not finding it. There's other programs as well that do basically the same thing. I just have a little heartburn on that one, and Representative Howard knows that too. We've had some discussions, but I'm going to try again to see if I can't get his support.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do rise in opposition to this amendment. Homeline provides an invaluable resource to our renters all across the state. Just in 2018, they served over 13,000 Minnesota renters, providing free legal advice, educational advice, and services to our renters. As I understand, Homeline really is the only statewide entity that is providing this service to Minnesotans. And just to speak briefly to the notion of having a lobbyist arm, if we were not providing resources here at the legislature to any organizations that had lobbyist arms, that's a pretty long list. And so Homeline is providing an invaluable resource to our renters all across the state, and I'd urge a no vote.
All those, Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Tice requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Tice.
And I just want to point out that there are other housing advocacy groups. That is so hard to say today, like Housing Link. And I just don't want to leave anybody out of the mix. I want to make sure that we do have our possibilities all competing for the same monies.
The clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Tice moves to amend Senate File Number 2226, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A32.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to try one more time, and then, of course, this is it. What this amendment does is it moves the $300,000 a year to a statewide tenant hotline to rental assistance for family homelessness prevention. I ask for your support.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would encourage a no vote again on this amendment. For many of the same reasons of the previous amendment, I'll also note that Homeline helped prevent an estimated 1,000 evictions last year for our renters. This is a valuable service, and we should support it, so I encourage a no vote.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2226, as amended.
Third reading. Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the talks we've had today. And I think there's some good things in this bill, but there's some things in here that do disturb me. You know, we've talked a little bit about the survey, and I'm not going to go into everything in the bill because it's a short bill and you should have read it. But I do want to clarify some things. And, you know, we talk about the slaughter of the deer within these farms. And I appreciate that Representative or Chairwoman Poppe brought the amendment forward to deal with the testing. There's unfortunate truth in that is that could take a very long time. And the test is available now. And I want to make that clear that other states are using this live test. And so the deer farm in Crow Wing County where I think it was 120 deer were slaughtered so that they could be tested. We could have done a live test. And what did trigger this test was a deer that was found to have CWD, but it wasn't in the farm. It was outside the farm. I think just under 15 miles away. And you know, I've lived in northern Minnesota all my life. I've been a hunter all my life. I've never, and so where they found this deer was in someone's backyard. Apparently it wandered into someone's backyard and died, and I've never seen that. And I also found out that they had actually taken 88 deer before that one that tested negative for CWD, and then this one shows up in a backyard, and I'm kind of a suspicious guy, and that made me kind of suspicious. And so if we have this live test, we should be utilizing the live test because 120 deer is a lot of animals to just be killing just to see when there was no problem there within that deer farm at that time. So as you're voting for this bill and as you're looking into this and it goes to conference, I hope we can keep in mind that if there is a test out there, and there is, that's what we should be using. And Chairwoman Poppe's amendment should have put that into place right away, that we shouldn't be able to destroy a whole herd of animals unless we do a test first, if that test is available. No one wants this to spread. I'm with you on that. But there's got to be some common sense. This, as was said before, this is people's livelihood. People have sunken their whole life savings into these farms. And there's other things we can discuss. I don't think it's going to go very far today. I think the bill is going to pass and move into conference. But I just needed to clarify that and look into it yourself. Look into this live test because nobody wants to just go out and arbitrarily kill animals. I mean, if you did that yourself, if you said, I think this deer looks bad to me, I'm going to kill it, you're going to be arrested. And yet the government can come in and do this without doing tests. So I can't support the bill today for that, and a few other reasons. I hope that because of the good things that are in the bill, I hope these issues can be worked out in conference. Thank you.
Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you had acknowledged me before third reading and forgot to call on me, so I'm going to make my comment now. Thank you. Members, I just wanted to comment on the CWD issue. You've heard other members talk about it's outside of the farm, and I want to address one issue that nobody has talked about, and that is the number of wild animal carcasses that are transported beyond our state lines back home. We have a number of sportsmen and hunters that hunt in areas in other parts of the nation, particularly Colorado and Nebraska, where CWD is a big problem, and these carcasses are oftentimes brought back to our state. So the problem really does largely exist outside of the state. Also in southwestern Wisconsin, there is a greater incidence of CWD, and so we need to be looking for those solutions as well. Lastly, with regard to the fencing issue, just want to remind you that upon enactment means that the governor may sign a bill, and July 1st leaves little more than 30 days to comply with such an ordinance. If suddenly every bovine farmer has to erect a fence, I would suggest that the cost of fencing and or the labor to get it installed will dramatically spike. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. And I cannot support this bill today. Thank you.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to thank Chair Hausman. It was such an honor to be the lead, the minority lead on the committee. I love housing, just love it. I'm so excited that I brought with me just a few things, and I know my time here is short. But what I want to do is just bring to your attention again how important housing is to Minnesota, to our jobs, to our economy. And I've heard over and over again that when housing isn't doing great, the economy doesn't do well. And we need to really make this a priority. We have too many homeless people, too many people looking for homes. If you have nothing to do, but even if you do have something to do, something very cool to do is Google the governor's task force on housing. Look at the 6 recommendations they make. They just make so much sense. And I hope that you also looked at the letter on your desk from Commissioner Ho. It has been very interesting getting to know her and to working with her. She did come to St. Cloud and go to a couple of the schools to talk about student homelessness. I was really impressed by that. But what really concerns me the most, and I feel like I've been saying this since I've been involved with the building and remodeling industry, is that we pay too much for housing. We'd have to look at ways to get those down. And I hope that in the interim and next year and the years to come, we take a greater look at how much the codes, the permits, the fees add to the cost of housing. We are substantially more expensive to build a home than we are in the states around our borders. And we're going to see a lot more residue from that. We are going to see that people are not building in Minnesota. But what I also want to talk about is aging. We don't talk a lot about aging, but we know that we need their homes for young folks to move into. We need that life cycle housing thing to keep continuing to go on. One thing I never thought I'd advocate for was manufactured homes. But the more we start looking at what the cost of an entry-level home is, how much it has increased, how unaffordable it is, we have to look at different solutions. And when we talk about our snowbirds that go down south, and some of them are staying there longer than they're staying here. But what you see is a lot of these parks that are geared towards affordable housing, it's their second homes, but also a very nice community for people to live. We need to look at that a little bit more, and I hope that we can do that. So even though we're ending the bill today, before it goes to conference committee, I know that we have a lot more work to do, and I look forward to it because I love housing.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to support this agriculture bill, and I want to thank Chair Poppe and the rest of the committee members and their staff. As Chair Poppe and I were talking on the way down here today, this is still a work in progress. We've got a lot of work to do. So again, with some reluctance, I'm going to support this bill, even though I do disagree with a few things in it.
Representative Poston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Chair Poppe, I want to just tell you that I really enjoy being on your committee, and I really appreciate you and I really appreciate the way that you manage your committee. And I also want to echo the appreciation for the staff, as you did earlier. But I want to tell you just a little story about one of your staff members, one of our staff members. Mrs. Connolly and I happened to park very close together in the parking ramp. And I'm a farm kid, and I still have that alarm clock that goes off in my head at about 4:30 in the morning, so I arrive here between 6 and 6:30 in the morning. And I have to tell you that Mrs. Connolly, with the exception of one day in this entire session, has been here before me. So not only does she do a great job and is the best CA, like you said, but her commitment and her work ethic is just incredible. Even on the snowy days, on the bad days, she beats me into her parking spot every morning. So I just want to throw that out. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your work ethic, and thank all the staff.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to see that there's some hemp provisions in this bill. So thank you, Chair Poppe. As many of you in the chamber already know, the hemp program that is in this bill was made possible with the leadership of a former Representative Phyllis Kahn and myself. Previous to me being elected, Phyllis had worked on, or Representative Kahn had worked on this legislation for about 20 years, if I recall correctly. And in 2011, when I was first elected, I was put on the Ag Committee, and she brought forward her bill. People on the committee kind of chuckled. She brought in some food. I didn't really know much about the industrial hemp program. At that time, was not very educated on it. And with the leadership of Representative Kahn, she brought me forward, and together her and I made the provision possible in the state of Minnesota, so our farmers have another opportunity for another crop. I've got a gentleman right now that's looking at planting not too far away from Alexandria. He's very excited about this business. The CBD business is a booming industry, and it's so exciting to see that in this bill we continue the great work that was started. Thank you, Chair Poppe.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I want to thank Chair Poppe and the other members of the committee for their hard work on the Ag bill, but I will be voting red on this bill today, not because this is a bad bill, but because the budget for the Ag Committee is so inadequate. We had to go outside of the Ag Committee to actually try to address the situation for our dairy farmers. All of agriculture is in dire straits right now. We need to pay more attention to this industry. We need more money in the Ag budget in order to do that. I will be voting red in protest of the small target of the Ag budget. Thank you.
Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last year I had the privilege, or last session, of being on the Agriculture Finance Committee under leadership of then Chair Hamilton, and it's nice to hear today that Chair Poppe and Chair Hamilton continue to work so well together. I do have a few issues on the agriculture portion of the bill, as have been already stated, so I don't need to repeat those. But as a member of the Housing Committee this year, Chair Hausman, I just want to thank you for your leadership. I enjoyed being on the committee. We did talk about some things this year that I think we need to continue to address. One of those is the increase, or how due to regulations, how much more expensive it is to build a home in Minnesota than it is in other areas. I think in order to adequately address affordable housing, it needs to continue to be part of the conversation. So I thank you for the testimony we had this year on that. I do appreciate there is a lack of affordable and workforce housing throughout the state, and this bill provides $29.8 million to the Challenge program, so that's good. I appreciate that. And also $19 million to the Family Homeless Assistance Program, which helps prevent homelessness. And just real briefly, the members that have been on the committee have already heard this, so I apologize to repeat, but I had the opportunity to to participate in the point-in-time homeless count back in January in my community. And that's something that I encourage everybody to take the opportunity to do that if you are able to. Ally Supportive Services is a homeless outreach program in Dakota County. I went out with one of their advocates to meet with and find and count the homeless people so that Amber, the advocate, could start the paperwork. And I have followed up with her since then. Many of the people that we talked to are on the list or have been housed since then. And the one thing, you know, when you actually go out and meet with these people and listen to their stories, find out what their circumstances are, you know, it's real easy. You see somebody and you think, well, they probably got that way due to some of the own decisions that they made in their life. What I learned that night is they won't dispute that. They realize that. They understand that. But it doesn't change the fact when it's 30 below that they're sleeping outside. And so as humanitarians, I think that we all need to keep that in mind, do what we can to help those people, even if the circumstances were brought on their own. They understand that in many cases that's how they got where they are. But again, Chair Hausman, thank you for your leadership. And even though there are some issues that have been on the ag portion of this that have been talked about, I will be voting yes on the bill. Thank you.
The member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just very briefly, I was hoping that we could have a more frank conversation about the costs that go into building homes in our communities, and Representative Juergens just talked about this, but there was a study that was done, was finished up towards the beginning of this year, and it's pretty illuminating, and I was really hoping that we could have a conversation about this. So Chair Hausman, if we could, I would love to have an opportunity to sit down and talk with you about that. I think it's something that we all should have a voice in solving. It's something that I think that if we could have done that legislative commission, it would have been really helpful. I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and work with you over the interim. I think it's important because the people who are affected are ultimately the people who we're trying to help earn that American dream of home ownership. And I think we all agree on that. So if we could work on that over the interim, I'd be very, very grateful. Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, we're sitting here this morning and we have the smallest bill, the smallest budget, and yet in contrast, agriculture is, if you include certainly not just the farming, but all the different businesses that support it in different ways, whether it's simple as equipment or it's medicines or it's whatever, the whole business, it has to be probably our biggest industry, and that's why we're called an ag state. And, hey guys, sorry, I get easily distracted. So, although they are in the alcove, I guess they're okay. But anyway, and certainly if you're not in the ag industry, then you're certainly affected by the ag industry. They take up more portions of our land in this state than anyone else. The people that farm for us, they love their land, they love their family, they love their God, they love this country. They're one of us. And I think we need to be very conscious of the fact that this is it may be a small bill, it may be a small budget, it may be short in time because we need to get on to other things, and I can certainly appreciate that. But understand what we write in this 50, 60 pages, 30 pages, however long it is greatly impacting a huge portion of the state of Minnesota and ends up even coming down to each and every one of us. So we need to be extremely cautious whenever we do things that affect those people. I know it's more difficult to represent them here. There's less of us out there. They're further away. But I can tell you that they are watching us. And when I talk to them, they do tell me the concerns that they have on all the different aspects. Agriculture is not just an industry, it's a way of life for so many people. And I just encourage each and every one of us that although we're short on time, and I will finish up here, that we're very serious on each and every line of this, because I can tell you this is just as important as a 1,200-page HHS bill, just as important as a 100 or 200-page transportation bill coming up. So members, let's be very serious on our vote. Representative Poppe, I thank you so much for the time in the committee. I thank you. There are good things. I probably should have listed those first. It would have been a little bit better pill. But there are things that I think do advance agriculture, and I commend you for that. But members, I'm not going to be able to support this today. I don't think it best represents the people of my district. I hope we can work on this in conference committee, and I hope as we move forward into next year into policy, we can be cognizant of everything that I just said. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair Poppe. The respect is mutual. I truly enjoy working with you, and I'd like to echo my thanks to the staff as well. And in addition to the names that were already mentioned, Mr. Harry Miracle also stepped in when we needed his help, so I want to say thank you to him as well. And also to all the committee members. We had quite a different makeup on committee this year, and it was fun. It was refreshing to hear the different points of views and the various dialogue there. Agriculture is going through a really difficult time, and that's where I'll echo what Representative Paul Torkelson said when he said, we wish we had a larger budget for the Ag Committee so that we could have done more to address the areas within production agriculture. And one of the things that I wish we would have done, if you look back to the avian influenza outbreak in the state of Minnesota, we addressed that. We increased the ag budget by over 40%, and we invested in whether it was the VDL, the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, the Animal Isolation Unit, the Wilmer Poultry Testing Lab, and we provided the resources necessary for the Department of Agriculture, Board of Animal Health, and University of Minnesota to work together to address that. And we led the nation in addressing that very important disease. And I wish we would have done that more directly with the CWD as well. Like I said, Chair Poppe, you've heard our concerns over here, and we know you're going to work. I know, excuse me, I'll speak on for me. I know you're going to work to address those as this goes into conference committee. Some of the good things I just want to point out in the bill, the additional dollars for rural mental health is very important. I know there's two champions on our side of the issue, or our side of the aisle, with Representative Bennett and Representative Keel. They've worked very hard on that this year and in years past. Chair Anderson, I want to thank you for the language in the bill that offers additional protections to farmers as it pertains to fraud with elevators and some of the things that we experienced here recently. Representative Fabian, you've been a champion on wolf and elk, making sure if there's any damages done to farmland, there's some language in here. So I want to thank you for your work on that as well. And Representative Franzen has already pointed this out. You know, her and former Representative Kahn worked very hard together, and we joked. A lot of us joked or laughed about that when those two were initially addressing this issue. But they jump-started an industry, and it's exciting to watch that. In addition to what has been brought up, one of the other areas, Chair Poppe, that I'm very concerned about is with the AGREET language in the bill. One of my concerns, we're funding very, very good projects within this bill, and we're looking towards AGREET to fund that. Now, my concern is if we take the House language and the Senate language and put them together, AGREET is annihilated. We've taken all the money away from AGREET, and we can't do that. And we worked very, very hard to establish that program. I understand what's going on for placeholders, et cetera, but we need to make sure that we protect AGREET because it's doing some wonderful, wonderful work as it pertains to agriculture. So again, I just want to say thank you very much, Chair Poppe. I truly enjoy working with you, and I'll be supporting this bill. Thank you.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for the confusion on the floor. To our minority lead, Representative Hamilton, I wound up on the list after you, and I'm not sure what that means. But Chair Poppe, I just wanted to say thank you for the hearing that you gave us for the Turf Seed Council and the $108,000 per year. We had great testimony on that and how important that is. I hope you can pick that up in conference committee. Thank you.
Representative Gunther.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to talk about Representative Hausman's committee. She was a great leader in the committee. She has a great desire to have homes for all. And I think the committee ran well. We could use a bigger target. But like everything else she does, she's making the best with what she has. And I appreciate all her work.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to speak to the housing portion of this bill and thank Chair Hausman for her leadership, and want to echo the thanks to the Minnesotans that shared their stories with us and are shaping the discussion on housing. Members, our statewide housing crisis demands the attention and priority of lawmakers like never before because it's at the center of so much of what we're debating. And I'm struck by the fact that this session, already this week, we've debated an education bill, HHS bill, and a jobs bill that might encompass about, 70, 80% of our entire statewide budget. But without stable housing, how can we expect our kids to succeed in the classroom? Without an adequate supply of homes, how are our economies going to grow and be strong? And the reality is, whether we're striving to eliminate the opportunity gap in our schools, improve health outcomes, or grow our economy, all roads lead back to home. This is a challenge in urban areas, in suburban communities in greater Minnesota, and it affects families, students, seniors. There are important measures in this bill that help us address this crisis, and I'm proud of the work that has been done in this Capitol and outside of it to highlight this crisis and need. But I do also rise to say that while we've highlighted this crisis, we need to move on from acknowledging and admiring the crisis and taking bold, bigger, innovative action to address it. And Chair Hausman highlighted a few key points that more than 500,000 households in Minnesota are cost burdened by their housing, and that number is growing. We have huge racial disparities in our communities in terms of home ownership and cost burden. Those costs are growing exponentially, especially for our renters who are confronted with, are we going to pay the bill for our rent, or are we going to afford groceries? Homelessness has increased 10% to statewide historic levels. And what we haven't discussed today is the loss of our naturally occurring affordable housing. In communities like Richfield and mine, in the blink of an eye, we lost 750 units of housing. Thousands of Minnesotans were displaced, including over 100 kids, 38 that experienced homelessness. Again, how are we going to narrow our opportunity gap if, because of our housing crisis, our children are being displaced from their homes? And the good news is we're highlighting this crisis, and the good work of the governor's task force shows that to meet this need, we need to be building 300,000 new homes in this state by 2030. And we're taking steps to do this in this bill, but I submit that these steps do not come close to meeting the need of this crisis, and we just have to state that. Minnesota's potential, our future, it will not be realized unless we meet the housing challenges of our state, unless we rise to the occasion. And we need to do that yet this session in this bill and in other bills and going forward. And I'm optimistic because we absolutely have the power to do that. What it does require is that we reimagine how we consider the way that our state, as a matter of public policy, addresses the challenges of housing. We need to reimagine, innovate, be bolder, and acknowledge that this is a crisis that we must meet if Minnesota is to be a strong state into the future. And we can do it. We're starting to do it in this bill. But members, it's time to kick things into gear. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Anderson.
Just very quickly, Madam Speaker, thank you. I want to thank also the people involved working on the bill, Chair Poppe and such. I wish the bill had more funding for production agriculture is my concern. And I'd be remiss not to thank Chair Mahoney for including funding in his jobs bill for dairy. And I think you're kind of a farmer at heart. I was impressed you came down to Fairmont, way down to Fairmont a couple of years ago, and it was enjoyable to visit with you talking about ag and your passion for jobs and for the state, so thank you for that. And also thanks to Chair Marquardt, the tax bill, some outstanding provisions in there for agriculture, for small business, the 179 and the other provisions as well. So I can't support this ag bill. I just wish it had more in it for production ag. But again, thanks to all that worked on the bill, and have a good day.
The member from Mauer, Representative Poppe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, you can always find a reason to vote no. And when you're looking for a reason, you will find that reason. But I'm going to just encourage you to vote yes. I want you to vote green. And the reason is, this is now the House position. This is our bill. So you might not like little pieces of it. You might not think that it's quite ready for prime time. You might have provisions that didn't get in or did get in that you would rather not have. But I want us to have a good, strong House position on a number of issues. And so I'm going to encourage you to vote for a really good bill that could be better from whatever outlook you're looking at, but it's really a good bill. So if you're thinking about, oh, it's not enough money, it's more money than the Senate has. If you're thinking that it's dealing with chronic wasting disease and maybe we didn't quite do it, the Senate is not dealing with chronic wasting disease in the Ag Committee. And frankly, I think it belongs there when it comes to the Farm Survey. It's not doing as much for farmer mental health. It's not doing anything in a number of areas that we are doing things for. So keep in mind that your vote today helps us to say, you know what? The House backs us. You're backing the fact that ag is important and that we are looking forward. And I appreciate Representative Anderson indicating that Representative Mahoney has $10 million for the Dairy Assistance Investment and Relief Initiative. Representative Marcourt is taking care of things. I tried to get money through the Higher Ed Committee as well. I was trying to, Representative Bernardi heard the bill, but I was hoping to get some more for ag specials. There is no doubt that those of us who serve on agriculture in the committee want more money in that budget. That has been true of every year that I've served on that committee. We are searching for more funds. And this year I tried to do it in any way possible that I could, and we were successful in some of that. So I appreciate that. And I just really would also say, for some of you, the chronic wasting disease issue is a heavy weighted issue, and you're concerned about that. But please don't let the weight of the CWD issue take down in your mind what the good is in this bill. We have good ag provisions, we have good housing provisions. Next Tuesday, we're going to hear the environment bill. You can talk as much as you want about chronic wasting disease and any other things on that bill. You can do that. Right now, the deer hunters aren't happy with this chronic wasting disease language, and the deer farmers aren't happy with this. That tells me that we're probably on the right path, because we're not going to please everybody, but we're trying to thread that needle and get us to a point where we're going to be able to see something done this year about that. So again, just a reminder, we're in the middle of the game, we're not at the end of the game. So if you want to get us to the end of the game with a strong version that includes many of the House provisions, vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 99 ayes and 28 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the chair until 1 p.m.
Representative Winkler moves a recess to the call of the chair until 1 p.m. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess to the call of the chair until 1 p.m.